After hearing so much about it in arguably the saddest anime shows of all time, I just finished watching Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and I gotta say, it was really, really good. I do think it's a little bit overhyped, and that would make two things that I've recently watched and overhyped in my opinion, that being Code Geass and now Cyberpunk Edgerunners. In saying that though, I still think it was very, very good. I was entertained throughout. It was a nice, really quick series that it kept me busy for a few days, so I really, really enjoyed it. We're going to be going through the entirety of Cyberpunk Edgerunners with spoilers ahead, by the way. I'm going to go through every single point of the plot, talk about what I liked, if there's anything that I didn't like. We're going to get into all of it today. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with many YouTube channels. So let's talk about Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Before we actually get into the hardcore part of the story, I want to talk about it in general because something that was very unique about it was the animation, the whole cyberpunk theme of it going on. I personally really, really like that. The only thing that I found weird, but I got used to it pretty quick, is just like, because we saw it in the first episode, right, is when David actually ended up going into, I don't even know what to call it. He used his cyberpunk ability to kind of move really fast and just, you know, I don't know how to describe it. You know exactly what I'm talking about if you've watched that show, how they show him moving. I thought it was strange. The fight scenes could have been a little bit better, but I did like the overall aesthetic of it. I thought it was pretty cool. The only other kind of issue I have with it, but it's not really an issue because it ended up being a very well done series, is that I found this incredibly predictable. I don't think it surprised me anywhere in this show, but you know what? That's okay, to be honest with you. So let's get into the actual story about it. So we start off with the main character, of course, that being David, and he attends school that his mom is paying for. It's very evident that they are struggling financially, and you're kind of introduced to the entire world of, they call it Night City. I don't exactly remember what it was called, but I think it was something like Night City, where everybody is kind of just a robot. You can replace your skin and different parts of you with, I guess you call it, they called it chrome. That's what they called it in the show, but I kept thinking like they're making themselves into being cyberpunks. And if you've been following the channel, you might know that I find this type of stuff pretty interesting because I think something like this is just completely down the road. Like, I'm talking hundreds of years from now, if that. I wholeheartedly believe that people are going to start living with like prosthetic limbs and replacing whatever they can, if possible, maybe just some structured organs created by humans. I think that we're going to take away our humanity as time goes on. So I personally found this idea very interesting. And David, of course, he didn't have any money. His mom was working overtime to barely make it through school. And it's kind of like, it starts off sad from the very, very beginning. I don't know if there was ever a positive part of this show, to be honest with you. But again, it was very well done. I kept seeing online before watching this because I've been looking for new shows to watch all the time. And overall, I keep seeing like Cyberpunk Edgerunners. This anime will ruin you. It will break you. It was really sad, but I didn't like, I didn't find myself like, oh my God, that's so tragic. You know, that's not how I felt while I was watching it. Regardless, okay? We're shown with David. We're introduced to his life, his mother. He goes to school. He doesn't have the same tech as everybody else, so he's bullied for it. And we start off the series with him illegally modifying by this character named Doc that he goes to, kind of like an underground doctor. He has tech that isn't, I guess, up to standard, and he ended up like frying the entire school system. His mom's going to work even more because she wants to pay for the damages. David just talks about that not being fair, and his mom's stressing out too much. And this is where I found it predictable from the very, very beginning. Of course, David was going to get his hands on some really, really cool tech, and they were kind of setting up with the way that his life was going. I think that they were setting it up for his mom to actually pass away because that's the next scene, right? They're going home. There's a drive-by shooting. They're caught within two gangs, and his mother ends up dying. And I kind of like the way that they set this up. And this is something that I wholeheartedly believe to be the future too. If not, that's kind of like the case now, where the team medics are looking for somebody because they have some premium package. I don't recall what it was called, but David was freaking out because his mother was just laying there almost dead, and these people are like, nope, not him, keep going, and they're just looking for people. That's kind of like how the world is right now, especially like if you want to get into some, maybe, you know, where I think it's a little bit touchy to talk about, so I'm going to skip that part. It's parts of the world right now, and it's going to only get worse as time goes on. That's what is the biggest and most sad part about it for me, because this stuff is definitely going to be coming in the future, if not that it's here already. So they're in the car crash. David's passing out, and his mother is basically dead on the road. Nobody's going to help her. David, though, manages to keep his mom alive by, I guess, using her own money. I think that's what it was. But regardless, they were left with pretty well nothing to pay for her medical care. In the meantime, though, David's depressed. David's still going to school. David's still getting picked on. And this is where we see like the first fight with the first bully. And this is another thing that I found predictable is David is going to get that tech and David is going to go back and fight this bully, but he's beaten up a little bit. He makes fun of the mom a little bit. So David decides to fight back with what he can. But of course, like they end up showing off kind of the cyberpunk kind of theme that the show had going on, because you have like little chips in your neck that you can put in. Like I have this Muay Thai one or whatever martial art that he had, and then he was just beating people up in your machines, and you're an advanced version of a human in this show. But while David was looking for money, this is where we figured out that his mom ended up stealing, or I don't know if she accidentally brought it home or if they described her as stealing it, because I know she delivered different packages, but regardless, she had access to a military grade spine, which gave you all of these crazy powers, and David wanted it equipped. And in the meantime, I don't remember if he found that first or if his mom died first, but regardless, he gets a call that his mom died. He's just completely 100% broke, and he goes to the doc to have this implanted on him. And this is, of course, where the series really begins to actually take off, because the first thing that David does, because David all of a sudden has all of these new powers, he's actually gotten like not only tech that is just as good as everybody in school, but he has tech that's military grade. It's better than everybody else. So he goes in and just destroys the bully. He's all happy to use his spine. It was painful, but it's working out, right? Nothing ever ended up coming from it, though, because apparently David is somebody who has a strong, a strong tolerance for this new tech, which is uncommon for people. So what the school was, they expelled him, but people are still interested in having him be a test subject to use that equipment. So I guess that's why they weren't going after him. But other than that, nothing really happens besides him learning to use this new tech. And this is where we're first introduced to Lucy. He ends up being able to spot her because he's, of course, fast and everybody has better senses now. And she's pickpocketing everybody. But they did a really cool scene. And this is what I was talking about, where I found like the theme of it really cool. I like the way they did the colors, and all of a sudden, like she's like pickpocketing everybody. She's jacking the chips out of everybody. Or I guess you could call it neck pocketing, right? He just grabs her wrist and looks at her, and she realizes that he's just as fast as her, and they end up teaming up pretty quickly, to be honest with you. Doesn't make a lot of sense, because in reality, who would do that? Like, hey, you guy on a subway, you want to team up and start pickpocketing people? That was probably like one of the few issues that I had. I wish that they could have come up with a better story, but then again, like, who am I? I can't really come up with a better story than what they actually said. But this is a whole tool to, like, honestly just introduce us to Lucy, get him in with the Edgerunners, and then we also find out that David's tech is more powerful than his body can handle, because he keeps using the super speed or super surge, whatever it was called, and he can't keep using it. Gets a bloody nose, passes out. Lucy ends up bringing him to doc, and this is where we learn, okay, you can only use this 2 or 3 times a day maximum. This is incredibly taxing on your body. And this is where I kept thinking to myself, and one of the reasons why I found this even more predictable is because I've known that this show is supposed to be one of the saddest shows that you ever see. So I'm thinking like, okay, he's going to use it way too much, and I think that he's going to die at the end. Other than that, though, he has a ton of fun with Lucy, and I was still thinking too, just like with his mom, I was thinking with Lucy, I was like, okay, this is going way too well. Lucy invites him over, they start hanging out, and then she brings him over to the moon, like that simulation. It's another thing that was really cool. And I don't know how much I want to actually get into it, but this is another thing that I can actually see coming in the future, where not exactly how it was presented in Cyberpunk Edgerunners, but kind of like VR inside your mind, like, you know, Neuralink. We've already started with that type of stuff, and everybody's just using it for adult content. You literally see people just like zoned out on the street. I see that coming in our future, and that's why I enjoyed like the scenery that we've had going on here. So Lucy ends up taking him to experience of the moon, where you can actually feel the heat of the sun. They're bouncing around. They're having an amazing time. I'm sitting here thinking like this is going way too well. And of course, we did find out that it was way too well, because she just used him as a distraction, because she was going to sell him over to the Cyberpunk Edgerunners, because he did have that high-tech equipment. Now, for the next episode, there's honestly not a ton to really break down, because David's going to end up being sold to the Cyberpunk Edgerunners. They're going to either kill him, or they're just going to rip him apart and take that part back. But we find out that Gloria was actually doing business with these guys, and I think that he was supposed to receive what David had, but I don't remember if that was the exact case. Either that, or she was transporting something. It doesn't really matter, but they had a good relationship with Gloria, so they end up sparing David because they were sad as well that she passed away, of course. David's really upset, feels betrayed by Lucy. They end up having him prove himself, and they have their first mission. Everything goes according to plan. Then Maine ends up, hey, you can be part of the gang. There's not a ton of breakdown with that, but it's just, of course, David's still using his powers. meeting everybody else. And also at the end of this episode is where we are officially introduced to Meride. And this is the guy that is like another big boss and gives all the gangs their different projects. And I couldn't, this is my own issue with watching shows. I have issues seeing like another voice that is so well known. Like this guy's voice was Gus from Breaking Bad. I don't know the actor's name, but I can't help but just picture Gus speaking. It's like I just watched The Boys. I couldn't see Gus as anybody else. And I swear there were times that David had the same actor as Tanjiro from Demon Slayer. Whenever there was like something really, really like hardcore going on and like he was stressing out about something, I could hear that exact Tanjiro voice. But I don't know because otherwise it didn't really sound like Tanjiro, if that makes sense. I need to look that up because I actually don't know, but that's my issue. Like, and the same thing, like, speaking of Tanjiro, Demon Slayer, like, I have such an issue watching Inosuke because his voice is Eren from Attack on Titan. I don't know if anybody else has that issue for me, but I can't help but see Faraday, and he's supposed to be this big menacing character, but I just think of, like, oh, hello, and welcome to Los Polos Hermanos. My name's Gus. Like, that's all I can think about, and then I kind of, like, I don't laugh at it, but I think of all the Breaking Bad memes. But we continue on, and I feel like this is going to be a theme of the video because once they are on their actual missions, there's not a ton to break down because they're just other missions and they're working for money because they just end up taking various jobs. Everything's going well. We're seeing David, who appears to be having the first happy moment in his entire life. He feels a belonging. He's bonding with Maine. He's bonding with the rest of the crew. But it wasn't until the end of the next episode where something huge happens. Other than that, he's just ridiculously pissed off at Lucy, which completely understandably so. I would hate her guts until the end of time, and I don't understand that why David made it his own mission to just end up taking her to the moon one day, but you know what? That's exactly what that's expected, right? That's completely expected. So there was one character that his name is escaping me because we didn't really get to introduce with him, but we first learn about cyberpsychosis, and this is where you put too much tech on, you start to lose yourself, and you just kind of go crazy. There's not a ton to break down there. And we finally find the first person who is experiencing cyberpsychosis. They're crazy. You don't know how powerful they are, and they just end up completely killing one of the gang members, which is, it sucks because we finally saw David with a smile on his face, but then I also knew, hey, this is supposed to end very tragically, and that I shouldn't have known that moving in because that is probably what made this a little bit more predictable in my opinion. But other than that, he starts targeting Lucy. David ends up stopping him because David is the most powerful of the group right now. And the whole point of that was pretty well to just learn about cyberpsychosis. And I was also thinking that's probably going to happen to David. But after David ends up saving Lucy, this is where Lucy ends up seemingly actually to fall for David a little bit because we see that he's getting guidance from Maine on how to actually talk to a girl because you can't forget he's still a high school kid. He's just learned to drive a car while on a mission with a gang. He's being introduced to all this new stuff. He's never kissed a girl before. So Maine was kind of priming him to get to know Lucy a little bit, and after he ended up saving Lucy, this is where their bond actually started up a little bit. And you figure out, while Lucy's past is still very, very hidden, and this was the case for a lot of people because Maine didn't care about someone's past as long as they can do the job. Honestly, that's kind of fair, especially if you're running a gang. But you see that David wants to learn more about her. She's a little bit hesitant to show, but then for the first time, Lucy ends up actually opening up to him, saying that she actually never brought anybody to the moon with her before, and that was something that she's always wanted to see. She wanted to go to the moon, and David ended up making a promise that he will be the one to take her there. I did not think this was going to happen. We're going to touch on it, but I do like the way that it ended. After that, the next big plot point of the story is Maine and his cyberpsychosis, and this is what we're seeing. And every single time that we saw it, I'm like, this is probably going to happen to David because David wanted more tech. David wanted to be more powerful, and he even wanted Maine's hands, and that was something that Maine actually told him, like Maine was his own mentor, right? I saw it coming. I saw it coming for David as well. But I really, really love the way that they did this because they really actually made it seem like a horrible, tragic thing. That obviously it is, but they really hammered it home with this. And this is where I was starting to talk about, like, I get the point of this show being insanely sad. Another thing that I thought was going to happen is I thought Lucy was going to die. But of course, we start seeing Maine with his cyberpsychosis. He starts having blackouts, hallucinations, and he's constantly, like, twitching, he's having mood swings, and the camera keeps panning to like his hand that's just kind of sitting there like just doing stuff like this, like shaking a little bit. But then we actually have a issue where Maine's hallucinating and he assaults one of the gang members, and I believe he was in a relationship with this person, but they didn't really, as far, maybe I missed it or maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't think they made that clear. Regardless, he ends up being put away for the mission. They need to improvise because, again, they're still working. They're still doing all of these crazy missions. Just Maine is eventually starting to lose it. Other than that, we're just brought into more situations where Maine is having more cyberpsychosis during that one mission. We had a scene where David was trying to, like, interact with somebody where, like, the victim, where Lucy was trying to get into his head, and he was telling David, like, this is going to happen to you. You can turn back now. And David was really worried about that. It was just kind of, I could see this whole thing setting up for David to have his big downfall. We end up saying goodbye to Maine, though, because Maine ends up sacrificing himself and just kind of accepting death because cyberpsychosis is going to take him. They end up succeeding. David takes away his Maine's gear. He ends up escaping, and everything ends up being okay, besides obviously them just losing 2 of the members of the gang. But then we actually end up entering a time jump, and this was really, really sad to see because you can kind of tell how David really lost himself. This is where it started to hit home for me a little bit because David was acquiring new tech. He's a leader of the gang. Obviously, they're worried about Maine. Lucy disappeared, but we find out that Lucy is actually, she appears to be living with David. Either that or they're seeing each other behind the scenes. Regardless, David is a shell of the man that he once was, and this was the saddest part to see more than pretty well anything from him because you could just tell by his demeanor. He was all about business, didn't care about anything anymore. He missed running jobs with Lucy, but Lucy doesn't want to be any part of it. And that was really, really what was well done, in my opinion. Now we get into towards the finale, actually, because this was a really, really quick series. Faraday ended up offering a job for David, and it all ended up being one big setup. But what he wanted, he also wanted Lucy, but David ended up talking to Lucy. Lucy doesn't want to work anymore. What she really wants, and she actually opens up to David a little bit, she used to just worry about herself, but now she worries about David. They end up loving each other, and I can just tell, I'm like, yeah, both of them are cooked, man. Both of them are not sticking around, but that's something I was wrong about. Lucy ended up living, of course. We also learned about Lucy's past, which it was a sad past, but there's nothing really that shocked me. You know, it's just one of those tragic child stories. She ran away, and she was built up from scratch to be this kind of weapon, and it was sad. She's on her own. They're living together. They love each other. David is no longer himself, and you can tell, too, because, again, they did the same thing that they did with Maine, where it's like David was twitching. He was twitching, and you know that cyberpsychosis is going to overtake him. Now, the other really sad thing that actually ended up happening was during the first mission with Faraday, David began actually experiencing cyberpsychosis a little bit, but he keeps saying, like, he's special. I can handle it. Doc warned him that this was going to take place, but he's actually, I don't know if he was ever in denial or if he ended up actually accepting it until towards the end, but he started experiencing symptoms of cyberpsychosis, which led him to killing an innocent woman. I don't know about you guys, but I was under the assumption that with David being part of this gang, he has killed many people. So this was a big thing for him because he ended up like slipping into a state of depression because all he could see was, he was kind of linking it to his mom dying, having hallucinations about that. He was kind of just going crazy and had to be brought out of it. He ends up shooting an innocent woman, and that's what really takes a toll on him. But that also brings us to the end mission, the final mission that all ended up being a setup. There's a lot of fight scenes. They're driving cars, and it ends up like, again, I feel bad because there's nothing we can break down with all of these fight scenes. It ends with David being tricked into using a new military-grade tech that will completely take him over. It's not going to work out, but they still want him because of his tolerance for the material that he already has. They want to use him to test this new thing. David ends up using it. They end up tricking Lucy into actually giving him a call, but he's suspicious of Lucy, but has no choice. He wants to get into this thing. And this is where the final fight takes place, and this is the toughest part, okay? David starts killing everybody. David's going through cyberpsychosis, and Doc ended up, and I forgot to touch on too, he ended up having a horrible interaction with Doc because he was hurting him because of the cyberpsychosis. He keeps warning David, like, you're going to lose yourself. You have these meds, and then you're done. You're going to lose yourself. David ended up actually accepting that. He keeps pumping himself full of meds. He keeps experiencing cyberpsychosis, and he is in a rush to complete this mission. He's lost himself. He's just going around killing everybody, and this is where the military actually deploys. I think they called it the Atom Smasher. Something Smasher. Something like Atoms. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but it doesn't matter. It's something that could actually rival David a little bit. And David ends up using his speed to actually find Faraday and everybody else, murders everyone in there. The really cool scene is when he actually got a hold of Faraday because, of course, we knew that he captured Lucy. Snaps his leg saying, you're not dying on me that quickly. Wanted to torture him, right? He ended up not being able to fight against the Atom Smasher because of the cyberpsychosis he's going through. He's running away from it. He ends up saving Lucy. And this is the part where it was really sad but I don't understand that this was so sad. Like, it was the saddest anime anybody's ever seen. David ends up having a little bit of a goodbye to Lucy and ends up having the remainder of the gang take her away. They wouldn't turn back because that was David's final request, and David finally goes out saving everybody. He finds himself content with the fact that Lucy is leaving and Lucy is going to end up being safe. He apologizes to Lucy that he actually can't go to the moon with her because that was his goal, right? And I always like those stories when a guy just, like, and of course, for a deserving woman, not a woman who sells you to a gang. But hey, Lucy ended up being a good person after all. But then again, like, is David really a good person? He was involved with the gang. He's killing people. I guess they're okay for each other. Sorry, I'd never, like, understood the appeal for somebody like Lucy. Like, why would you want somebody like that? I'm not going to talk to you. I have a horrible past. Like, I don't know, man. Not for me. David refuses to comply with the Atom Smasher, and he ends up being executed, and the series ends up ending with Lucy actually going to the moon, but it's this really, really sad thing because she's going there by herself. She wanted to be with David. She wanted to spend the rest of her life with David. David was no longer with her. David lost himself, and she finds herself alone yet again on the moon for real this time. And she soothes herself by remembering David experiencing what she's experiencing. Like, I can feel the sun. Whoa. And it was this really happy, sad kind of moment. And this is where it really, like, okay, that was really sad, where Lucy started the series alone. She found love, and then she's alone again, but actually accomplishing her dream because that was David's goal. And David ended up making that happen for her. The series just ended up closing right after that. The series concluded with Lucy imagining that he did not become an Edgerunner and he was his happy self on the moon with her. Look what you did to him, Lucy, huh? Look what you did to poor old David. He just wanted a nice life with a girl in his life, and you sold him. Regardless, I thought this was a really good show. It was really cool, really quick. I like the artwork. I like that they weren't afraid to kill the main characters. Kind of like, it was a show that I really liked, but I wasn't going to actually mention it just in case that somebody's thinking about watching it. I don't want to spoil it, but regardless, it was really, really good. I didn't know that there wasn't going to be a second season. I didn't know it was going to be this short. I thought it was great. Overhyped, but it was great. Kind of like I was just talking about Code Geass earlier. This isn't the saddest thing I've ever seen. I'm not going to recover. Like, honestly, I don't know if I'm going to really think about Cyberpunk Edgerunners all that much. It was just a good series, and I'm going to move on to the next. Guys, let me know what you thought about it down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to continue on with anime reviews, why don't you check out two of them right here? I have the recent season of Demon Slayer and then the Attack on Titan finale. I would love to have you in either one of those videos, guys. Take care. Excuse me for messing up that.